Good morning, everybody. It is the August 3rd a.m. edition of C2-A-Days, following up our jam-packed show from last night. We do have a primarily Group of Five conference roundup, but there are some Pac-12 notes as well to start with on Cal and Washington. At Cal, bad news for running back Byron Cardwell, who will miss the 2023 season due to injury, according to head coach Justin Wilcox. Wilcox also mentioned that defensive back Colin Gamble and linebacker Sam Ross will also be out this year due to injuries. And a note on transfer running back Justin Williams-Thomas, who is limited early in fall camp due to injury. We did get some notes on the pecking order at wide receiver. Bear Insider reported that Hunter Anderson and Monroe Young were the primary top three wide receiver group in drills. Davis, Montgomery, Hightower, and Robinson were next up. Jack Indries was the first tight end, and Asher Aldering followed. At quarterback, Sam Jackson was primarily the first team quarterback. It sounds like took the vast majority of reps with the top unit. However, redshirt freshman Fernando Mendoza rotated in some with that first unit, and NC State transfer Ben Finley was primarily with the second teamers. At Washington, the first team offense looked as most expected it as the Huskies opened for camp. One thing worth noting, however, Cameron Davis was first up in running back drills and in team periods with the first team units. Dylan Johnson did mix in. That, of course, is according to reports from Mike Vorel of the Seattle Times. Similarly to the Davis-Johnson setup, Devin Culp was the top tight end, with Jack Westover also seeing time. The wide receiver trio was, as expected, Jalen McMillian, Roma Dunza, and Jalen Polk were the primary pass catchers, but that group is deep, and several others worked with Michael Penix in the first team as well, including Jeremy Bernard, who caught a 40-yard touchdown pass from Penix to in camp. One note out of Iowa, we've mentioned the gambling scheme and accusations and charges that have gone on there. A name popped up from the University of Iowa yesterday. John Stepp of the Gazette reported that Hawkeyes kicker Aaron Blum has been accused of underage wagering, including a bet on the Iowa State game in 2021. Moving on to the Group of Five, Troy, who a lot of folks may know, especially if you're interested or play in a league that has defense and special team scoring, or if you're interested in Sun Belt Conference futures, or whether or not Troy is going to continue to be the favorite for most folks there in the Sun Belt. Defensive end TJ Jackson. It was announced yesterday that he has been suspended indefinitely, and that's a pretty big deal. Jackson's one of the best and most productive players for that unit, and Troy statistically had one of the best Group of Five units in the country last year, and is expected to do so this year. My ratings and stat projections are all very high on Troy entering this season. Also in the Sun Belt, a day one recap in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution mentioned that fifth-year senior and third-year starter quarterback Darren Granger has added 20 pounds of muscle in the offseason. He's now listed at 6'4", 225. He is getting some preseason buzz on award lists as well. I think a lot of us just kind of have this idea maybe of Granger as primarily a runner, but he has a very strong arm, and of course has the build, prototypical build of what you might hope for in a quarterback. So things are lining up for Granger to have a really excellent season. But also, the running back position, even though there are new faces in that group, that same article quoted head coach Sean Elliott saying that Marcus Carroll is, quote, as good a running back as Georgia State has seen. So high praise there, and I know expectations are high for Carroll this year. In a week 0 matchup, a couple of teams who will be squaring off early on, UTEP and Jacksonville State, that new CUSA matchup. At UTEP, Brett Bloomquist of the El Paso Times offered a list of 4 names that impressed during the first week of fall camp for the Miners. Not surprisingly, Tyron Smith made the cut. Though Smith spent the spring at Texas A&M, it was apparent to Bloomquist that the senior still had great chemistry with quarterback Gavin Hardison, so that's great to see. But it's worth noting that Smith wasn't the only wideout highlighted. Jeremiah Bullard has been competing to join Smith and Kelly Akiari in the starting rotation, but there were also some positive notes on a true freshman name, maybe to file away for the future, in Azel Jolly, though Bloomquist did mention he expects Jolly to redshirt. At Jacksonville State, the Gamecocks are entering their second week of camp as well. According to the Anderson Star, the depth chart is taking shape. A name of note, one that escaped my eyes early in the offseason. Jack State has added a Division II All-American, Gerard Bowie, who caught 102 passes for 1,773 yards and 18 touchdowns at Concord University last season. Bowie has emerged as a starter in drills and in the first week of practice alongside quarterback Zion Webb, who we've mentioned before, and wide receivers Michael Petway and Sterling Galvin, and tight end Sean Brown. That seems to be primarily the group of pass catchers, and of course Webb as quarterback there for Jacksonville State. Head coach Rich Rodriguez has been quoted saying that Bowie is a competitive guy. He's a good route runner, got good speed. He's had a few drops, but I think it's just still thinking. I think we get him out of thinking mode and just let him play, and he's going to be able to help us. So Jacksonville State, not a prolific passing attack. We're not expecting that necessarily, but Bowie's been incredibly productive thus far. He's a junior, and I believe has 3 years of eligibility left as a 2020 signee. At running back, Anwar Lewis has recently been sidelined with injury, so Ron Wiggins has taken most of the first-team snaps. Rich Rod called Lewis and Wiggins co-starters, though Malik Jackson, the transfer from ULM, and Juwan Evans are also in the mix. Sounds like that's a pretty big, pretty deep group of running backs there at Jack State. But worth noting that Lewis probably had the edge to be the top ball carrier, but with him missing some time, Wiggins sounds like is pretty clear to be the next man up. Webb, who just recently got that extra year of eligibility, his 7th season, seems like he's entrenched as the starter at quarterback, though Logan Smothers, who we mentioned, started fall camp with a really impressive first practice, and Tayshawn Smoot reportedly are also seeing plenty of reps and mixing in a variety of rotations and players. We also have notes on the 3 military academies. Army opened fall camp yesterday, August 2nd. And in case you haven't heard, the Black Knights have a new offense this year. NCAA rules have made running the traditional triple option more difficult. And as a result, we can expect at least a little more passing in 2023. However, Bryson Daly is the only Army quarterback with any game experience. I believe he has 1 career pass attempt to date. As mentioned by Seth Mendelson of Black Knight Nation, Daly, who is a junior, will fight for the starting job with the likes of Alex Meredith, as well as several other candidates, including possibly several freshmen. And that was according to head coach Jeff Monken. So not a real clear picture, though, in this report. Daly is the name mentioned first, and that is somewhat consistent with things that I've seen over the course of the offseason as well. It's also worth noting, and I know we don't talk a whole lot about the offensive line from a fantasy perspective, but though the Army offensive line is an experienced group, especially by academy standards, there's a transition period. And this group has apparently been bulking up. Multiple 300-pounders, which is not common. Said that there was a quote from one of the offensive linemen in the piece by Mendelson, Connor Finucane, that said that the top 10 players on the offensive line are all over 300 pounds, which has never happened at Army before. So there's just some interesting notes there on how the offensive line is reacting both off the field, gaining weight, but also Finnegan mentioned more bending and running style movement patterns, now more upright, different posture, different footwork after having been in the triple option required the more bending, different movements. So just something to note. Might be a little bit of a transition period. At Navy, who is not completely scrapping the triple option, but is installing a little bit of a new offense as well. We mentioned earlier in the week that Teddy Gleaton entered fall camp with the inside track to start at quarterback for the midshipmen in week 0 against Notre Dame in Dublin. However, Bill Wagner of the Capital Rosette has reported that Gleaton's chance to hold on to that top spot at the depth chart are in jeopardy due to his summer school obligations conflicting with preseason practices. So that may open the door for Ty Levite or Xavier Arline to seize that job and get back into that starting spot. At Air Force, close watchers and those looking for the replacement specifically for Brad Roberts in the Falcons' run-heavy system may have noted that fullback Emmanuel Michel was one of 2 academy players, along with defensive back Zion Kelly, who attempted to gain an extra year of eligibility by taking a turnback semester last spring. There was a little bit of uncertainty whether or not Michel was going to be able to make his way back, get that extra year of eligibility by trying to coordinate taking a semester away from the academy. Turns out that apparently was denied. Michel is not listed on the most updated online roster. And also of note, Sion Anglau, who is a junior and expected to compete for that starting spot in the backfield, probably at that fullback position that Roberts held down last year. He also was not listed on the recently updated Air Force roster. That leaves Owen Burke and Jet Harris, who are co-starters on the preseason depth chart that the Falcons released as the top candidates. So I know that there is a little bit of a question as to whether or not those guys are going to get the type of workload that Brad Roberts got last year. That seems somewhat unlikely to me personally. John Lee Eldridge III, who has been a big play running back, more in the traditional running back role, I would expect is still going to get the bulk of the carries, or at least have the opportunity to showcase his talents, because he does seem to be the most talented player probably on the entire roster there at Air Force this year, and they do a pretty good job of getting their best players the football. So, but worth noting, there certainly could be some value for guys like Burke and Harris getting that fullback role. A couple of quarterback notes in the Sun Belt. Out of Arkansas State, most reports indicate that JT Shrout, the incoming transfer, is the favorite to win the starting job, but head coach Butch Jones has insisted that the race is wide open. Jackson Daly is the top challenger, but Jones has also often mentioned the name of true freshman Jalen Rayner, who excelled this spring. So if you're looking for a name to file away for the future, or maybe a true freshman that could have an opportunity to start in year 1, Rayner probably should be on your short list. At Southern Miss, Scott Watkins of the Sun Herald has emphasized that newcomers Holman Edwards and Billy Wiles were the top candidates to start at quarterback ahead of returning starter Zach Wilkie. And that's consistent with what we heard in the spring, and a lot of projections and predictions and preseason depth chart notes have had that as well. So that is going to be it for this AM edition. We will be back, Matt and I, this evening for a C2-A-Days recap. Still a few more, FBS programs opening up camp today, Thursday. We will have plenty of notes that will gather throughout the day from across the country So do check in with us again this evening. Again, this is Nicholas Ian Allen, CFB Winning Edge on Twitter, and for Campus to Canton and the C2-A-Days, August 3rd, AM edition. We'll see you again this evening.